Welcome to my channel. Subscribe and enjoy daily stories about cheating, revenge, and relationship advice. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office, the skyline of San Francisco laid out beneath me like a conquered kingdom. The city had changed over the years, but so had I. From the early days of Parker Innovations to now, the stakes had grown higher, the pressure more intense. Yet, with every success, every new contract signed, I couldn't shake the sense that something was slipping away. And it wasn't just Clara. My phone buzzed on the desk, interrupting the stillness. It was a message from Clara. "Dinner tonight? I booked us at the Fairmont at 7. Can you make it?" I stared at the screen, already knowing the answer. I had a call with the team in Tokyo at 6:30, and afterward, I'd be preparing for the board meeting the next morning. I typed out a quick reply, "Sorry, got tied up with work. Can we reschedule for the weekend?" There was no immediate response, but I could already imagine her reaction: another canceled dinner, another night of me choosing work over her. It wasn't intentional. I loved Clara, but the demands of my business consumed me. With the new product launch just weeks away, every moment felt crucial. By the time I left the office, it was close to midnight. The streets were quiet, and when I arrived home, the house was too. Clara was already in bed, the soft glow of her bedside lamp casting shadows over the sleek, modern furniture we had picked out together. I stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her. She was facing away from me, her body curled under the silk sheets, her breathing slow and even. I slipped out of my suit and into bed, careful not to wake her, but as soon as I settled, I heard her voice, low and laced with frustration. "You said you'd be home for dinner." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I know. I'm sorry." The Tokyo call ran longer than expected. Clara turned to face me, her eyes sharp despite the late hour. "Evan, it's always something. Tokyo, London, Singapore, there's always a reason why you can't make time for me. We've barely seen each other this month." I sat up, knowing this conversation was coming but unsure how to navigate it. "You know what's going on right now. The launch is critical. After this, things will calm down, I promise." She shook her head, pulling the covers tighter around her. "You've been saying that for years. I'm tired of waiting for after this. What about us? When do we come first?" "Clara, I'm building something for us. For our future. Parker Innovations is going to change the game, and when it does..." "Parker Innovations is going to change the game," she interrupted, her voice rising. "What about our marriage? When did that stop mattering to you? You've already changed, Evan. You've become so obsessed with your company that I don't even recognize you anymore." I opened my mouth to protest but stopped. She wasn't entirely wrong. Somewhere along the way, I had become so absorbed in the business that everything else had taken a back seat. But I wasn't sure how to explain to her the pressure I was under, the constant drive to stay ahead in a world where one missed opportunity could cost millions. "I'm doing this for us," I said softly. "For you." "No," she said, shaking her head. "You're doing this for yourself." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. She rolled over, turning her back to me again, leaving me staring at the ceiling. I knew I should say more, should fight to make her understand, but the exhaustion from the day weighed me down, and soon, I found myself drifting into a restless sleep. The next morning, I left early, long before Clara woke up. The air between us felt colder, the gap wider. I could feel her slipping away, but I didn't know how to stop it. There was always another call, another meeting, another demand for my attention. As I sat in the back of the town car heading to the office, I checked my phone, already flooded with emails, and sighed. I could sense Clara's frustration building, but in my mind, there was no other choice. Parker Innovations was my life's work, and right now, it needed every ounce of my focus. The sacrifices I made weren't just for me. They were for both of us, for the life I imagined we'd have when this was all over. But when would it be over? That evening, I received another message from Clara. "I'm going to a gallery opening tonight. Don't wait up. It was a simple statement, but it stung more than I expected. She didn't ask if I could join her. She didn't even mention the name of the gallery. It was as if she had given up on trying to involve me in her life, knowing I wouldn't be there. I stood at the window again, looking out over the city I had once dreamed of conquering. And in that moment, I realized that while I had won battles in the boardroom, I was slowly losing the war at home. The success I had fought for was everything I wanted, but at what cost? It wasn't until weeks later that the photographs arrived. The manila envelope had no return address, but something about it made me pause as I sifted through the day's mail. I tossed aside the usual documents, contract renewals, partnership offers, financial reports, and focused on the envelope, my thumb tracing its edges before I finally tore it open. Inside were a series of photographs, crisp, high-resolution images. I flipped through them, at first not understanding what I was looking at. Then, my breath caught in my throat. Clara. In every one of them. And with her, a man I didn't recognize. His hand was on her waist in some, their faces close in others, his fingers brushing the hair from her cheek. The final photo, the one that made my hands shake, showed their lips inches apart, caught in a moment of intimacy that left no room for doubt. The artist. I sat down hard, the weight of the betrayal crashing down on me. Clara had mentioned his name once, Leo, after that gallery opening. She had come home late that night, a bit flushed, her eyes sparkling with excitement. At the time, I hadn't thought anything of it. She was passionate about art, and I was relieved that she had something to distract her from the growing distance between us. Now, it was clear she had found more than just inspiration. My phone buzzed. It was Clara, texting from her lunch meeting with friends. Out with the girls. Might be late tonight. Don't wait up. I stared at the message, the words twisting like a knife in my chest. Late again. How long had she been lying to me? How long had she been seeing him while I was buried under spreadsheets and conference calls? I took a deep breath and called my lawyer. Evan, is everything all right? Michael's voice was calm and professional, but I could hear the hint of concern. He'd been with me through countless deals and negotiations, but this wasn't business. I need you to start drawing up divorce papers, I said flatly. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Are you sure? What happened? I have evidence, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. She's been seeing someone else, all right. I'll start working on it immediately, Michael said, his tone shifting to one of business. Do you want to confront her first? No, I said, my jaw tightening. Not yet. I wasn't ready to hear her excuses, her apologies. Not when the proof was so clear, so damning. I needed time to process it all before facing her. The next few days passed in a blur of meetings and phone calls, my usual routine keeping me from falling apart. But every time I stepped into the house, the weight of her betrayal was there, lingering like a shadow. I couldn't even look at the artwork she had chosen for the walls, knowing now that her love for art had led her to him. It wasn't until the weekend that I finally decided to confront her. Clara came home late from another outing, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor as she dropped her purse by the door. I was sitting in the living room, the photographs spread out on the coffee table in front of me. She froze when she saw me, her smile fading. Evan. What's going on? I looked up at her, my expression unreadable. We need to talk. Clara glanced at the photographs, and her face went pale. She hesitated, her eyes darting between me and the damning evidence in front of her. Evan, I can explain. I stood, my voice cold and controlled. Explain what? That you've been lying to me. That you've been seeing someone behind my back. Her eyes filled with panic, and she stepped forward, reaching for me. It's not what you think. Don't touch me, I snapped, stepping back. My chest was tight with anger, my hands clenched into fists. I gave you everything, Clara. I built this life for us, and this is how you repay me. By screwing around with some artist. She swallowed, tears welling in her eyes. "Evan, please, I don't want to hear it," I said, cutting her off. "I've already spoken to my lawyer. We're done." The words seemed to hit her like a physical blow, and she staggered back, her hand covering her mouth. "No, no, Evan, please. You can't just end it like this. It was a mistake. I was lonely, and you were never around. I didn't mean for it to happen. You didn't mean for it to happen." I repeated, my voice dripping with disbelief. "You didn't mean to sleep with him. Do you even hear yourself?" Clara wiped at her eyes, her shoulders shaking with sobs. "I love you, Evan. I do. I just needed something more. You've been so distant, so consumed with your work. I felt invisible. I was working for us," I said, my voice hard. "I was building a future for us, for you. And you threw it all away." She collapsed onto the couch, her face buried in her hands. "Please, Evan. We can fix this. We can go to counseling, we can." "There's no fixing this," I said, cutting her off again. "I've already packed your things. You can take them and go. The divorce papers will be ready by next week." Clara looked up at me, her tear-streaked face full of disbelief. "You're really doing this? You're throwing everything away, just like that?" "I'm not throwing anything away," I said quietly. "You did that the moment you decided to cheat on me." She opened her mouth to say something, but the words didn't come. Instead, she stood, wiping her eyes one last time, and nodded. Without another word, she turned and left the room. As the door clicked shut behind her, I collapsed onto the couch, my hands running through my hair. The weight of the moment pressed down on me. The decision had been made, but the consequences were just beginning to unfold. The weeks following Clara's departure were a whirlwind of meetings and legal consultations. I had started to regain my focus at Parker Innovations, but every corner of my life was shadowed by the remnants of our shattered marriage. Despite the chaos, I had managed to navigate the business landscape with my usual precision. But Clara? I had no idea what she was doing or where she was living. Then came a text from her one evening that changed everything. "Evan, I need to talk. It's urgent." I stared at the screen, my heart racing. What could she possibly want? I was tempted to ignore her, but something told me it was important. I replied, "Where?" She suggested meeting at a coffee shop downtown, and I reluctantly agreed. I arrived first, scanning the crowd until I spotted her. Clara looked different, disheveled and tired, her designer clothes now slightly wrinkled. It was as if the glamour that had once defined her had faded under the weight of our separation. "Evan," she said softly as I approached, her voice laced with an uncharacteristic vulnerability. "Clara," I replied, keeping my tone neutral as we settled into a small table in the corner. "I'm glad you came," she said, her hands trembling slightly as she wrapped them around her coffee cup. "I wanted to talk about James." "James?" I raised an eyebrow, surprised. James was her son, a bright, curious 12-year-old who I had always thought of as my stepson, despite the divorce. "What about him?" "Evan, I've been struggling since we separated," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've lost my home, my stability. I'm worried about how this is affecting James. He misses you, you know. I can't be a father to him anymore, Clara." "I'm not even married to you," I replied, my voice firm. "You need to figure this out on your own." She leaned forward, desperation in her eyes. "No, you don't understand. I have an idea. If you help me get back on my feet, I'll make sure James has a stable environment. I need your help to leverage your connections with Grant Mendoza." My gut twisted at the mention of Grant, my business rival. "You want me to help you manipulate him? After everything?" "It's not manipulation," Clara insisted, her voice rising slightly. "It's survival. I have insider information about Parker Innovations, information that could give Grant the edge he needs to take you down. But if I give him what he wants, I need something in return. You can help me set up a meeting. Are you out of your mind? I shot back, the coffee cup in my hand feeling heavy. You think I'd let you play both sides? You're suggesting I sabotage my own company for you? Evan, please. I'm not asking you to sabotage anything. I just need to protect my son. I need to be able to afford a place to live. You have the power to help me. The desperation in her voice was palpable, but it only fueled my anger. You think this is going to make things better? You'll be putting us both in a precarious position. It's not worth the risk. Her expression softened for a moment, and I saw a flicker of the Clara I once knew. Evan, I'm scared. I made a mistake, and now I'm trying to make things right. But I can't do it alone. You were always the smart one, you can figure this out. I sat back, the weight of her words hanging heavily in the air. She was vulnerable and terrified, and a part of me wanted to help her, if not for her sake, then for James's. But the thought of partnering with her in a scheme against Grant left a bitter taste in my mouth. Let me think about it, I said finally, my voice weary. But I won't make any promises. And Clara? If you're using James as leverage, that's crossing a line. She nodded, tears pooling in her eyes. I just want to protect him. I can't lose everything, Evan. Not again. The days passed, and Clara's proposal weighed heavily on my mind. I tried to focus on work, but my mind was preoccupied with the potential fallout of her plan. I decided to reach out to Grant, my rival, to gauge his interest in a partnership without revealing Clara's involvement. Evan. Good to see you, Grant said, his voice dripping with false enthusiasm as we met in his sleek office downtown. The space was filled with expensive art and modern design, a stark contrast to the chaos that seemed to be unfolding in my life. Grant, I replied, keeping my tone measured. I wanted to discuss a potential collaboration between our companies. He raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Really? You're interested in partnering up? Maybe. There's a lot of potential for us to leverage our strengths together, I said, carefully treading the waters. You know I'm always open to business opportunities, Grant replied, leaning back in his chair. Especially if they come with a competitive edge. What do you have in mind? I kept the details vague, knowing I had to tread lightly. I think if we combine our resources, we could make a substantial impact on the market. You have strengths I admire, and there's no reason we can't work together for mutual benefit. He considered this, a calculating look on his face. I'm intrigued, but I'll need to see something solid before I commit. I nodded, thankful for the small victory. Of course. Let's set up a follow-up meeting next week to discuss the specifics. As I left Grant's office, I felt a mix of relief and dread. I knew Clara was right about one thing, I could help her, but the stakes were rising. If I was going to help her navigate this dark path, I needed to keep my wits about me and ensure that her desperation didn't lead us both into a trap. When I returned home that night, I found Clara waiting for me. Did you talk to him? She asked, her eyes bright with hope. I did, I replied cautiously. But I need you to understand the risks involved. We have to be smart about this. No reckless moves. She nodded earnestly. I promise, Evan. I just want to protect James. If you're willing to help me, I'll make sure this works. I took a deep breath, preparing for the road ahead. All right, let's take it one step at a time. But remember, if you pull any funny business, I won't hesitate to protect what's mine. Clara's expression turned serious, and I could see the fire in her eyes. I won't let you down. I'll prove to you that I can handle this. As she spoke, I felt the weight of our situation pressing down on us both. We were standing on a precarious edge, and I could only hope we didn't fall. In this game of manipulation and betrayal, the stakes were higher than ever, and the consequences could be devastating for both of us. The air in the office was thick with tension as I prepared for the meeting with Grant. I had spent days analyzing data and crafting a proposal that would convince him to collaborate, but the thought of using Clara's inside information still gnawed at my conscience. Every day, I saw James's innocent face in my mind, and the desire to help him kept pushing me forward despite the risks. On the day of the meeting, Clara arrived at my office early, her face drawn and anxious. "Evan, I've been thinking," she said, wringing her hands together. "Are you sure about this? We're playing a dangerous game." "I know," I replied, my voice steady. "But if we're going to do this, we have to go in confident. I'll handle Grant. Just stick to the plan." Clara nodded, though I could see her uncertainty lingering. "What if he figures out what we're doing? I can't afford to lose James, and I don't want to drag you down with me." "Focus on James," I urged. "We'll figure this out together. You need to remember that this is about securing a future for him." As we walked into the meeting room, I could feel the weight of the moment. Grant was already seated, flipping through the proposal I had sent him. His eyes glinted with interest, but I knew he could be ruthless. "Evan, Clara," he greeted, standing to shake our hands. "I appreciate you both coming in today. I've looked over your proposal, and I have to say, I'm intrigued by the potential for collaboration." "Thank you, Grant," I said, taking my seat across from him. Clara sat beside me, her posture tense. "I believe this partnership could be mutually beneficial. With your market influence and our technological innovations, we can create a significant advantage." Grant leaned back in his chair, assessing us. "I like where this is going. But I need to know more about the specifics. How do you envision the operational structure?" As I explained the proposal, I caught Clara's eye. She was listening intently, a mix of hope and anxiety swirling in her expression. For a moment, I felt the connection we once shared, back when our goals were aligned, and our dreams were intertwined. "Your projections are ambitious," Grant said, interrupting my thoughts. "But you'll need to back them up with real data and a solid commitment. If I'm going to risk my resources, I need assurance that this isn't just a pipe dream." "Of course," I replied, my heart pounding. "We can provide all the necessary information. Clara and I have been working on this together, and we're ready to present a detailed analysis by next week." "Next week works for me," Grant said, leaning forward, his interest piqued. "But I need you both to understand, I won't tolerate any missteps. If you want this collaboration to succeed, you'll need to bring your A game." As the meeting progressed, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The tension in the room began to lift as we engaged in a productive dialogue, and I could see Clara relaxing beside me, her confidence returning. After the meeting, we stepped out into the bustling San Francisco streets, the golden afternoon sun warming our faces. Clara turned to me, her eyes bright. "Evan, I can't believe how well that went. I really think we have a chance." "It was just the first step," I cautioned, but a smile tugged at the corners of my mouth. "We need to keep this momentum going." "I know. But I feel like we're really doing this together," she said, her tone filled with optimism. "Maybe this could lead to something more than just business." I raised an eyebrow, unsure how to respond. "Let's take it one step at a time, Clara. Right now, we have a lot on our plates." As we walked back to my office, she placed her hand on my arm. "I appreciate you, Evan. I know I messed up, but working together like this makes me feel hopeful again. For the first time in a long time, I feel like we can rebuild something." Weeks passed, and as we continued to develop our proposal, I noticed a shift in our dynamic. Clara was more present, more engaged. She poured herself into the project, and with each passing day, I saw glimpses of the woman I fell in love with, passionate, driven, and fiercely protective of her son. One evening, as we were finalizing the presentation, Clara looked up from her laptop, her expression serious. "Evan, I've been thinking a lot about us, about the past. I know I hurt you, and I can't take back what happened, but I want you to know how sorry I am." I paused, my fingers hovering above the keyboard. "Clara, I appreciate that. It's been difficult for both of us, but we have to stay focused on the business for now. I understand, but I don't want you to think that I'm only here because of James or to salvage my reputation," she said, her voice earnest. "I genuinely want to rebuild our relationship, even if it takes time." I considered her words, my heart heavy with conflicting emotions. I want to help you, but trust doesn't come easy after everything that's happened. We need to focus on this project and keep our boundaries clear. Of course, she said, nodding, though I could see the disappointment in her eyes. I just wanted you to know that I'm committed to making things right, whatever that looks like. The day of the presentation arrived, and Clara and I walked into Grant's office, nerves churning in my stomach. The atmosphere was charged as we began our pitch, presenting our data and projections with meticulous precision. Impressive work, Grant remarked, his expression unreadable as we wrapped up. I appreciate the thoroughness you've put into this. I think there's potential here, but I'll need to run a few more analyses before we move forward. Clara and I exchanged a glance, a mix of relief and hope flooding through us. Thank you, Grant, I said. We look forward to your feedback. As we left the meeting, Clara's excitement was palpable. I can't believe how well it went. I really think we're on the brink of something big. I hope you're right, I replied, feeling a flicker of optimism for the first time in weeks. But let's stay grounded. We still have a long way to go. In the following days, as we continued to develop our strategy, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between Clara and me. There was a sense of camaraderie, a partnership forged through the trials we had endured. One night, as we were working late, Clara turned to me with a soft smile. Evan, I know we've been through a lot, but I believe we can emerge from this stronger. You're not just my business partner, you're someone I want to be in my life for the long haul. Clara, I said, my heart racing. I appreciate everything you're saying, but we need to keep our focus on the work. I know, but I can't help how I feel, she insisted, her voice steady. I want to be more than just the woman who hurt you. I want to be a part of your future, both professionally and personally. I took a deep breath, contemplating her words. Let's take things slow. We have a lot to figure out, and I need to be sure we're making the right choices. Clara nodded, understanding but resolute. I'm willing to wait, Evan. For as long as it takes. As time went on, our partnership flourished. Grant agreed to collaborate, and the project became a roaring success, breathing new life into both our companies. But more importantly, it started to heal the rift between Clara and me. One afternoon, as we celebrated our first major victory, I found myself staring at Clara across the table, her laughter filling the room. She caught my gaze and smiled, a warmth radiating between us. Evan, she said, her voice softening. I've been thinking. Maybe we should take a chance on us. We've rebuilt so much, what's stopping us from moving forward together? I smiled, a feeling of hope swelling within me. Maybe it's time we give it a shot, Clara. A fresh start. As we exchanged smiles, I realized that redemption wasn't just about forgiving the past, it was about embracing the future, together. In that moment, I saw not just the woman who had betrayed me, but the woman who had fought to reclaim her life, to protect her son.